My sister mocked me in front of the whole family by showing off her new branded clothes and calling me a loser while I was paying for her education. Life is good when there's a loser who pays for everything. She laughed, pointing at me. Still wagging your tail, hoping for a bone, my dad muttered, laughing. 3 days later, she was screaming, begging me. The evening began like any other awkward family dinner: lukewarm casserole, recycled stories, my mother talking over everyone to keep the peace. My father sat at the head of the table like a retired king, silent unless he was laughing at someone. My sister Lindsay arrived 20 minutes late, sweeping into the room like a gust of perfume and fake compliments. She dropped her new coat, a shiny, obviously expensive designer piece, on the chair as if it weighed nothing. Sorry, traffic was hell. And people in this town still don't know how to drive, she said halfway through her third eye roll. No one cared about the traffic. What they cared about was the coat, the heels, the nails, the whole look. She always made sure there was something to admire. Or envy. Her little performances never failed to attract attention. Even my Aunt Donna complimented her purse and asked if it was Italian. Lindsay said it was French, then looked over at me and smiled. You know, she said, sipping her wine, life is good when you have a loser to pay for everything. She didn't laugh right away. She let it sit there, hanging, while everyone processed it. Then she smiled wider, waiting for a reaction. And she got one. My dad burst out laughing, shaking his head like I just tripped in a clown costume. Still wagging your tail, hoping for a bone? He muttered. I looked down at my plate in silence. The gravy on my potatoes suddenly looked like mud. I'd paid their tuition, their rent, their credit card bills quietly, without question for the past 2 years. I hadn't bought a new pair of shoes in 8 months. She'd need it. Just one more semester. 3 times now. Mom said nothing. My younger cousin grinned and whispered to his girlfriend. It was like I wasn't even in the room, just some pathetic story they all shared behind closed doors. I mean, Kyle, Lindsay said, flicking a crumb from her perfectly white sleeve. You're practically begging to be used. Everyone laughed. Like it was just another joke. I stood up. No dramatic words, no smashing of plates. I just walked out. I didn't even take my jacket. I heard her behind me shouting something, still laughing. I walked until I couldn't hear her anymore. I didn't know where I was going, I just kept walking, like if I kept walking I might end up somewhere that actually mattered to me. About 20 minutes later, my cell phone started buzzing. I ignored the first call. And the second. Then the text started. Kyle. Pick up. Seriously. You have to come back. This isn't funny. Kyle, please. Dad said to call you. Something happened. I stopped. Something felt wrong. Then the last text came. The police are here. I didn't go home. I didn't even go back to my apartment. I drove without thinking, out of the suburbs, past the dark stretches of highway and warehouses, until I found the old gas station near Harlow that hadn't been open in years. I parked behind it, turned off the lights, and sat in silence. The glow from the dashboard cast just enough light to see my hands. They were shaking and I hadn't even noticed. I should have gone back and said something. Anything. But what do you say when your own sister calls you a loser in front of your family while you're literally paying her tuition? And your dad laughs like it's the best joke he's heard in years? I turned off the engine and climbed into the back of the van. Just a thin mattress on the floor, a sleeping bag, a half-eaten bag of trail mix somewhere in the corner. I didn't care. I lay there staring at the metal ceiling, the cold creeping in through the walls, and I couldn't sleep. My mind kept playing her voice over and over. Still wagging your tail. My phone buzzed at some point, but I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Then again. I let it go for a while before finally turning it over and looking at it. 11 missed calls from Lindsay. 4 from Mom. Even 1 from my dad, which was weird because he never calls anyone unless they're dead or it's tax season. I stared at the screen. A bunch of texts had come in, too. Lindsay's were all over the place. Kyle, pick up. I'm sorry, okay? It was a joke. You always take things too far. Then one more. Kyle, please. Something was happening. I locked the phone and threw it away. I didn't believe her. Not after that dinner. I thought she was manipulating the moment, playing the victim. She always did that when things didn't go her way. But I kept thinking about the last time. Something had happened. It was phrased strangely. She wasn't the type to play the drama card unless it was public. This wasn't public. This was panic. When I finally turned the phone back on around 7 in the morning, I had a voicemail from my mom. That's when things changed. Kyle, listen, your sister, after you left, she collapsed. They took her to the ambulance. The doctor said something's wrong. They think it's her heart. Please come. We're at St. Vincent's. I drove without brushing my teeth, without changing. Just grabbed the wheel and drove. I don't even remember most of the drive, just red lights, blurry signs, and the growing noise in my head. At the hospital, my mom paced the waiting area like she was trying to wear a hole in the tile. My father sat slumped in a chair, holding a styrofoam cup and staring at nothing. When they saw me, neither of them said anything. My mom just nodded toward the double doors. Lindsay was hooked up to machines in a private room. Her face was bare, her hair pulled back, no jewelry, no phone in her hand. Just wires and monitors. She looked younger somehow. I stood in the doorway for a while before going in. No one else followed. A nurse told me quietly that she'd had a major panic attack. But during tests, they'd seen something in her scans. A shadow behind her heart. Not a definite diagnosis. Just a shadow. Could be a mass, could be fluid, could be nothing. But they would keep her under observation. More tests in the morning. I sat in the chair in the corner and stared at her. She didn't wake up, but her hand twitched from time to time. For a moment I thought of all the things I wanted to say. All the things I'd held back for years. How she manipulated people, how she used me, how our parents led her. I thought about saying every bitter thing I'd ever thought. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I just sat there. Hours passed. Eventually I realized that I hadn't eaten since dinner. I also realized something else. They only called me when something went wrong. They only saw me when something was broken. Then the anger came back, but this time it was colder. More focused. Not the kind that makes you punch walls. The kind that makes you make plans. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. And this hospital room was where I began to see it. I wasn't done being used. But they were done thinking I wasn't going to do anything about it. The next morning she was still asleep when I left the hospital room. My mom was in the cafeteria, stirring sugar into her coffee like it was something personal to her. My father slept in one of those plastic chairs near the elevator. I didn't bother talking to either of them. I needed some air. I drove to the bank. Not to withdraw money, God knew I'd done that too many times, but to check something I hadn't looked at in years. My account. My actual account. The one I'd barely touched because every month a big chunk went straight to Lindsay's rent, tuition, and whatever emergencies she made up. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the numbers on my banking app. I had less than $3,000. And Lindsay? I knew her passwords. She'd given them to me 2 years ago when she locked herself out of everything during a mental reset weekend. I hadn't used them since. Until that day. When I logged into her bank account, my mouth actually went dry. She had over $26,000 sitting there. Savings, checking, a travel fund. An account literally labeled shopping. She'd been hoarding while I maxed out my credit card to cover her books. I didn't even feel anger. It was something worse. Numb clarity. So I made a phone call. It's an old friend of mine, Ethan. He used to work in IT for a law firm before he went freelance. He owed me for paying his rent one winter. I called in the favor. I told him I needed help drafting something official, something sharp but legal. I didn't tell him all the details, just that I wanted to stop being someone's freebie. By that evening, I had a preliminary draft of what looked like a will, but wasn't. It was more like a financial statement. In it, I detailed every dollar I'd sent Lindsay since she'd started school. Receipts, wire transfers, Venmo logs. All itemized. And at the end was a simple statement. I am no longer financially responsible for Lindsay Morrison. All existing agreements, formal or implied, are rescinded. Any future contact regarding financial support will be ignored. It wasn't legal in the sense that a court would rubber stamp it and say I was free. But it was formal. Documented. Enough to change the conversation. The next morning I printed out 3 copies and sealed them. One for Lindsay. One for my parents. And one for me. I arrived at the hospital just before visiting hours. Lindsay was awake, sitting up in bed, scrolling through her phone with one hand and picking at dry toast with the other. She looked up when I walked in, and I could tell she'd been crying, though she tried to pretend she hadn't. I didn't say anything right away. I just handed her the envelope and sat down. She opened it, scanned the first few lines, and froze. What is this? I shrugged. You're serious? I didn't answer. She read the rest. Slowly. And when she looked up, her face was something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not feigned innocence. Guilt. Real raw guilt. That was the moment I knew I had her attention. But what she said next? I didn't see it coming. She whispered, "You might want to check the safe in Dad's study." I stared at her, waiting for a grin, a punchline, but it didn't come. She just sat there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, her eyes fixed on the blanket pulled up to her waist. "The safe?" I asked. She nodded. "You should see what's in there before you decide you're done with this family." It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. I left without saying much. I didn't even tell my parents. They were sitting in the hallway arguing again, probably about parking or insurance, or what kind of flowers to send to her recovery room. They didn't notice me leaving. I drove right up to the house. They hadn't changed the locks. Of course they hadn't. No one expected me to be the one to leave. The study was exactly the same. Dark wood, old maps on the walls, dusty trophies from Dad's high school baseball days. The safe was behind a false panel in the bookcase. Lindsay and I had found it when we were kids playing hide and seek, but back then it had only held old coins and a half-empty bottle of bourbon. I knew the combination. My dad used the same one for everything, my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. The lock clicked and I pulled it open. This time there were no coins. No bourbon. There were folders. Thick, weathered ones. A few manila envelopes with broken seals. And a stack of printed emails, stapled together, dated nearly a decade ago. I sat down on the floor and started to read. My father had been lying about money for years. Not just to us, but to creditors, the IRS, the school Lindsay supposedly attended. He'd taken out loans in my name. 2 of them. I found the paperwork. My signature forged. My social security number. The works. It went deeper than that. He had opened a credit card in my name. Maxed it out. Paid it off with a wire transfer from some consulting gig he never mentioned. That same month, I thought my truck was broken into and my wallet was missing. I kept digging. There was a letter stamped and neatly folded from the bursar's office at NYU. Dated last year. It said that Lindsay hadn't been enrolled since the fall semester of 2022. She wasn't even in school anymore. All those classes I'd paid for? All those books? The rent in Manhattan? She dropped out almost 2 years ago. I sat back on the floor and felt everything spin around for a second. And then, at the bottom of the pile, a photo. An old one. Lindsay and me. We were kids, maybe 10 and 8, standing next to our grandmother's piano. Behind us, blurry but unmistakable, was the same man I'd seen in old family albums, someone my dad never talked about. His brother. My Uncle Jared. But in this photo, Jared wasn't just visiting. He was wearing our dad's ring. The same one he never took off, passed down from his father. But in the photo, it was on Jared's hand. The date scribbled on the back was 1997. The year before Jared disappeared. The same year our grandfather died and everything in the house changed. I stared at the photo for a long time. Suddenly, the hospital, the dinner, the years of guilt, none of it was the whole story. There was something else buried in that family. And Lindsay knew it. Before the safe, before I saw the documents and the old photo, before everything unraveled, there was one night that quietly marked the beginning of the end. It was that same night in the hospital, after I handed Lindsay the envelope that cut her off. I remember getting up to leave, already thinking about how I'd put distance between myself and everyone else forever. I'd imagined maybe moving out west, disappearing, starting over with no more dead weight around my neck. But as I was heading for the door, Lindsay said something low that made me stop. "You were never the loser, you know. You just never realized you were surrounded by people who needed one." I didn't turn around. I just stood there. The room buzzed with that faint electronic hum that you only notice when everything else is quiet. "I lied," she said. "I lied about going to school. I dropped out the year after I started. I hated it. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd help me anyway. And Dad, he said to let you. He said you'd never stop unless someone told you to." I turned around. She wasn't looking at me, just staring at her own hands. I'm not proud of any of it, she added. I thought maybe if I made something of myself first, if I could prove I was worth it, then I'd tell you the truth. But every time I tried, it felt like I was stuck in the version of me that he made. That's when I realized she wasn't just confessing. She was unraveling. I didn't know how deep it went. I didn't know about the forged documents, or the loans, or the safe. But I was beginning to see the shape of it. The long shadow our father cast, and how much of our lives had been built in response to him. Me, trying to earn respect. Lindsay, trying to remain his favorite. Neither of us living for ourselves. Just playing parts in his silent, manipulative game. Remember when I got that internship in LA? She asked suddenly. I nodded. It was a big deal supposedly. Some fashion startup. She'd posted about it all over social media. It wasn't real, she said. I paid to be part of a month-long thing. I didn't even finish it. I stayed with a guy who had his own problems, and I left after a week. I told Dad and he said not to tell you. He said he didn't want you to think you were right about anything. That part hit harder than the rest. It wasn't just about money or school. It was about the lengths he'd go to keep us apart, to keep me in a place where I'd never question what I was giving up. He used to say you're nothing without someone to fix, she added. I think he believed that. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a minefield, and every word was another step into something I hadn't seen coming. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said, finally looking at me. But you should check the safe in Dad's study. I was about to ask what she meant when she quietly added. It'll all make sense when you see what he's been hiding. That's what changed the direction. Not the breakdown, not the guilt, not the excuses. It was the realization that our family wasn't just dysfunctional, it was built on lies. And not just the recent ones. It had started a long time ago, and we'd just been living in the aftermath. And what I found in that safe a few hours later proved it. I didn't go back to the hospital right away. I had to sit with everything I'd found, really sit with it. The safe, the letters, the bank accounts, the photo of Jared, the forgeries, the years of deception disguised as duty. It was like discovering your whole life had been orchestrated for someone else's benefit, and you were just the guy who never noticed the strings. I spent those 3 days doing something I hadn't done in a long time, nothing. I walked around the neighborhood where we grew up. I sat in the old park where Lindsay and I used to take turns riding a rusty scooter. I passed the elementary school where I'd once walked her home after she'd gotten into a fight over a stolen eraser. Funny how she looked up to me then. The day I finally went back to the hospital, it wasn't for her. I wanted to return the letter from Jared, the one Dad never sent, maybe never meant for me to see. But I felt she deserved to read it too. Lindsay was in a hoodie and pajama bottoms, her hair pulled back, no jewelry, no attitude, no performance. She looked real. She looked like a version of herself I hadn't seen since we were kids. She stood up when I walked in, but she didn't move toward me. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. She nodded. I thought not. And I'm not asking you to fix anything. I wouldn't even know where to begin, she said. I pulled the letter out of my jacket pocket. He wrote this in 2004. He was living in Arizona. It was addressed to me. She took it slowly. Didn't open it right away. I found other things, I said. The loans Dad opened in my name. The inheritance Jared was squeezed out of. The credit card. The fake internship. And that you haven't been enrolled in school for almost 2 years. She sat back down. I didn't know about the loans, she said after a long pause. But you knew about the rest. She nodded. Quietly. I thought maybe if I became something impressive, you'd never find out. That was the plan? I asked. Lie your way to success and hope I never ask questions? I know how it sounds. I didn't say anything. She didn't defend herself either. That was new. I'm not going to be around, I told her. Not for a while. I'm leaving town. I've already cut off everything Dad has access to in my name. Closed the cards. Notified the banks. I even called the school you were supposed to be at. Told them to stop contacting me. Her eyes flickered up, a little startled. You're really doing this? Yes. I have a copy of Jared's letter. I think I'll find him. She looked down at the envelope in her hand, as if it was suddenly heavier. You're not coming back? I don't know. But I'm not staying. I hesitated, then pulled another folded piece of paper from my coat. This is everything you owe me, I said. Rent, tuition, flights, textbooks. It's not for court. No deadlines. No threats. Just numbers. You can pay it. Or not. It's up to you. She took it, didn't open that one either. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, she said something that stopped me. I've been thinking about this a lot, you know. The day you dropped out of college to work more hours. You told Mom you didn't like school. But you did. You loved it. You just didn't think we could afford 2 tuitions. I looked back at her. I was 13, she said. And I remember thinking that you were the only one in the family who ever gave something up for someone else without trying to get credit for it. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't looking for gratitude. Not anymore. Do whatever you want with your life, I said. But do it with your own money, your own choices, your own mistakes. Not mine. She nodded. As I walked out into the hallway, I passed my mother. She looked like she wanted to talk, but I kept walking. My dad wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. By noon I was back in my truck with a duffel bag and Jared's letter in the passenger seat. I didn't know where in Arizona he was or if he was still there. But I had the return address, and I had time. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. I wasn't anybody's backup plan anymore. Not their fixer, not their foundation, not their punching bag. Just a guy with a road ahead of him. And that was enough. Update. It's been 6 months since I left. I didn't end up in Arizona. At least, not for long. Jared wasn't there anymore. The address from the letter led to a boarded-up house on the edge of a desert town where the post office knew his name, but hadn't seen him in years. I left a note with the clerk in case he ever came back. That's all I could do. After that, I drove without a real plan. Did some carpentry work in New Mexico, picked up odd jobs fixing fences and old porches. I stayed with a retired mechanic named Ray who let me sleep in his shed in exchange for helping rebuild his barn. I learned more about myself in 3 months of hard silence than I had in 3 decades of talking to the wrong people. I was in a diner outside of Flagstaff when I got the message. It was from Lindsay. A photo. Of a receipt. She'd made the first payment. Not huge, but real. She wrote underneath, asterisk. I'm not going to ask for thanks. Just letting you know I'm working off the list. Asterisk. I didn't respond right away. Then, 2 days later, she sent another photo. It was the front of a small art gallery. Nothing fancy. A rented space with white walls and her name printed crookedly on the door with stick-on letters. She was starting something. For real this time. Not to impress anyone, not to post, not to chase approval. The third photo hit different. It was her and our mom. At a lawyer's office. With documents. She had convinced our mom to open the books. To separate finances from Dad. Lindsay said she'd found out that Dad had been taking money from their joint retirement accounts. Quietly. For years. Our mom had no idea. She'd been trusting him to manage everything. They confronted him. Apparently, he didn't deny it. He just got up and walked out of the office. He hasn't been home since. No calls. No emails. Nothing. Lindsay said she's not even mad. Just tired. She said, asterisk. Turns out the only thing he was good at was pretending he was in control. Asterisk. I still haven't gone back. But I've stopped running. I rented a small place in Colorado. Simple town. Good people. I'm teaching a woodworking class at the local community center. Nothing major, just kids and retirees learning how to sand properly without losing a finger. I don't think about revenge anymore. I think about peace. And the strangest part? I don't hate Lindsay. We're not close. We don't talk every day. But there's no more war between us. Just 2 people trying to become something better than what we were raised to be. And I think that's enough.